actually, within the last 3 hours, the very possibility was raised, showing that we all resonate together. I suggested to Joan and to Gigi that the drug czar be invited here, and that I believe you should meet with your enemies. I love this idea. If any of you have read Encounters with the Archdruid by John McPhee, it's about David Brower, the great conservationist, who was such a radical conservationist that the Sierra Club threw him out. They just couldn't take this guy. And he went down the Grand Canyon with the head of the Bureau of Reclamation, who built Glen Canyon Dam. And they hated each other. They had sworn death practically on each other. And they went down the Grand Canyon together, and each night at the campfire they would set a bottle of scotch between them and work on it and rave. And it's fascinating. It's wonderful. I would love to talk to these people because, you see, I'm as concerned as anyone else about the fact that we're drugging ourselves to death because we can't find what we're looking for. We are dysfunctional. And like an alcoholic or a junkie, we take drugs to forget. We do everything to forget because had we been in balance over the last few centuries, we never would have gotten into this mess. We're the generation who's having to pay the bills, but these bad habits have been in place for centuries. And the answer to the drug problem lies in psychedelic, self-directed psychedelic therapy is the only way I can say it. I mean, if you ask, what can you do? Straighten yourself out is one answer. And how to do it, that's how to do it. Yes. Didn't you have a question? No, sorry. Yes.
Could you comment on partnership and friendship in shamanic healing? I asked Nicole and she said you know best.
Partnership and friendship.
As themes of shamanic healing.
Well, shamans are fairly irascible people, I've noticed. Mircea Eliade talks about this in his great study of shamanism, and I think the phrase he finally settles on is essential but peripheral. In other words, the shaman lives in a little house at the edge of the village or a short distance from the village into the forest, and as the keeper of the doorway to these fairly terrifying dimensions that involve life and death, he's a fairly remote character. The friends of shamans are usually shaman themselves. The apprentice relationship is a whole other issue, and in my estimation has been very perverted in the Eastern way of doing things. What I found in the Amazon was that these people were very willing to share most of the secrets that I wanted to know. You had to know a lot to ask the wrong question. Eventually we got to the wrong questions, and they were bewildering. I mean, like, I was very interested, of course, in intensifying and intensifying and intensifying this encounter with the DMT thing. And so I kept asking my shaman teacher about these plants that he was reluctant to talk about that I knew were stronger. And finally he said, it's comida de perro, it's food for dogs. And I didn't know, since my Spanish is so terrible, whether this was an idiom or literal. And he said it's mal y bizarro, strange and evil, and not for Christians. And what he was talking about was simply a more intensified state than what he was working with and curing with in the ayahuasca sessions. So, it's a gradient. It's a thing. I saw a shaman once who had been practicing shamanism for 25 years in the Amazon have an ayahuasca trip where he said after it was over with he'd never do it again. That was it. So, pride goeth before a fall. On the other hand, it's very kind and forgiving and user-friendly to beginners. It's a relationship. It's not a thing. It's a somebody. And if you approach it as a somebody rather than a thing, you will have a much richer time for it, I think. Yes.
Mr. Sanderson's work, visualization and cellular change for cancer cures, I wonder, do you feel that people can reach this dramatic knowingness that you explained today any other way than via the plant?
Well, this question always comes up, and I'm famous for my answer, so I might as well give it again. No. Well, see, everybody always says, but surely yoga and the Sufis and this. Well, who knows? I haven't had time to check all this out. I did check out yoga. I feel fairly confident in saying that 95% of yoga is absolute hokum. The other 5% is pure gold. But sorting it out among these babas and, keeping your guts intact, it is just, really a daunting task. However, there is a concept in Hindu thought that I'm interested in. It's the concept of Tantra, usually associated with sexual yoga, but for my purposes, I'm simply interested in the meaning of Tantra. It means shortcut way. It takes the notion that in a single lifetime, you can attain some kind of tremendous reconstruction of your internal horizon of transcendence, a way of saying enlightened without saying it, in a single lifetime. And I'm not enough convinced of any of these theories of reincarnation and so forth to be willing to just write off this lifetime if I make a botch of it. So I'm not only interested in ways that work, but ways which work quickly. And nothing can come close to this psychedelic thing. This is it. Imagine getting to a place with your spiritual quest where the problem is to hold it down. Well, everybody who takes psychedelics reaches that place. A way that I've gotten this into a formula for myself is to say, once you come upon this psychedelic issue, you are no longer involved in the process of seeking any spiritual answer. You are now confronted with facing the answer. You wanted a tool for spiritual transcendence? Here is a spiritual tool transcendence, the likes of which you can barely wrap your mind around. If there are other ways to do this, I can't conceive of it. Perhaps ordeals and things that are tremendously stressful. Anytime you make somebody think they're going to die and then they snatch life from the jaws of death, that's a shedding of crap. But it's no fun, right? And yet, in the privacy of your own home with 5 grams of mushrooms, you join Magellan and Lindbergh and Amelia Earhart. You're out there. That's the real frontier. There's no safety in that zone. It's authentic exploration of reality. Yeah.
Thank you.
Unique that you feel LSD
You
has
must be
brought to the
very
psychedelic
sorry.
experience that
Very sensitive to
is
people's
not there without it?
Thank you, Lola. Well, what LSD brought to the psychedelic experience was millions upon millions of experiences. No other psychedelic has ever been produced in such volume. So surely, even in today's world, 90% of the people who've had a psychedelic experience, it must have been LSD. as far as its superiority or
in terms of a teaching from a different perspective, like a piece of the lesson that may not be there with the plants. Is there something that you found with that?
nobody's ever asked me this question. A unique contribution of LSD. I don't know. I'm not the greatest of enthusiasts for it. I thank God for it. I mean, it created me and my friends and my worldview. I can't really think of anything it does that something else doesn't do. The way I ended up using LSD was as a magnifying glass to inspect other psychedelics. 100 gamma of LSD and 60 milligrams of mescaline, or 100 gamma of LSD and smoking DMT. 100 gamma by itself is not much, but it seemed to work as a kind of source of energy to inflate these other states. The original so-called psychedelic experience that the people were working with at Harvard in the famous experiments there was this combo of mescaline and LSD that gave them the best results. And that is highly visionary. I mean, that is just a kaleidoscope of three-dimensional vision. Tim Leary said a wonderful thing about LSD. Actually, I asked him if he'd said it. He couldn't remember ever saying it, but it certainly described my experience with LSD. He said, LSD is a psychoactive drug which occasionally causes psychotic behavior in people who haven't taken it. And I witnessed psychotic behavior all around me in people who hadn't taken it.
And one thing with mushrooms, LSD and mushrooms, what sort of a...
I never did that.
Just curious.
Scratch my back and you'll discover a hard-bitten conservative. Yeah, somebody else.
I was wondering, in terms of the ayahuasca, do you have any... You mentioned some of the places, the conditions you might want to take it under, but obtaining it and or any safeguards in terms of who you would obtain it from, and you mentioned that it really varies in terms of the dosage, in terms of who makes it.
Yeah, it's a real problem. You're going to have to deal with other people and their motives and motivations. The problem always with ayahuasca is to get it good. And you never know, till you're out there, whether it's going to be good or not. So all I can say to you is, hone all the social skills you need anyway to get ahead in life, and it will aid you in discerning shit from shinola in the realm of ayahuasca as well.
By good, you mean intense?
Good ayahuasca? Yes, strong visions. You want it to be strong. If it isn't visionary, I would be skeptical of everything being said around it and about it, because that's what it must be. That's the quintessence